To see Kerry Bentivolio, former congressman, is hoping to return to the U.S. House this year. He has a special guest with him. Would you like to introduce your guest?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, hello. This is Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. You might be familiar with the face. He's been on Fox News, Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham, right? And he's, president of the London Center?
Vice President.
Vice President
of Operations.
London Center, which is kind of like a think tank in Washington, D.C. And anytime you want to know what's really going on in international affairs and national defense, he was the guy, because he was always down in the trenches. And, you know, if you want to know what is really going on without the filter of the Washington establishment, if you will, you go direct to the guy in the trenches. And he was my guy in Washington, D.C. We got to know each other. I like this style because he gave you a military style briefing, which I explained last night. It's pretty, you know, just the facts, please. And then you ask for an analyst and a comment on their opinion based on the information you get. He has some experience well, I'll let him tell you some of the other interesting things that he has done. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Shaffer.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, thank you, Congressman, for that great introduction. I was one of Kerry's first advisors, right? I mean, I was called by a mutual friend saying, hey, we got this guy who's coming to town. He's a constitutional guy, and they're going to try to eat him alive.
That's right.
Right? And it happened. It happened.
Yeah.
So, part of what I do also, and you can, if you go on the President's website, I'm part of Trump 2020. I'm one of the President's advisors on the national security side. So you'll see several interviews between Laura Trump and me talking about the President's current policies and where we're going. And I can't go into all the details, but I do advise several members of the President's cabinet on national security issues. I'm in with them fairly often. And one of the things I can say honestly is I was in with Louis Gohmert just yesterday, a Friday. Boy, time flies.
Yeah.
And we were talking about a bunch of national security issues which actually are in the headlines. And I was walking down the hall, and there's Justin Amash, my friend Justin, and I say, hey, Justin, how you doing? And he say hello, and I say, oh, by the way, I'm going back out going to Michigan to talk for Kerry Bentivolio. He says, will you tell Kerry hello, and we need him back. So that's one of the benefits of sending him out there. He's like recycled. Right? I mean,
Better the second time around, like
right.
It's like lasagna.
Yeah.
Better the next time around.
Yeah, it's like better the second time. And plus, he's not going to have people pulling wool over his eyes like a lot of these freshmen. And I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how much money you got, DC is different. It is a swamp, right?
Yeah.
And he's the kind of guy, and I know from our mutual friends, he's very close. I work very closely with the Liberty and Freedom Caucus, which Kerry's very close to. And those guys right now, they're kind of the power behind the scenes. If Mark Meadows decides he's not going to do something, it doesn't get done. Kerry's friends with Mark. And there's a pretty good chance, in my judgment, and I've talked to Mark, I was with Mark at the opening of the Jerusalem embassy. We didn't go. We weren't that important. But Mark Meadows and I were invited to the White House for the video feed of the event. So Mark and I spoke, and I said, we're coming back out. And he said the same thing. I'm going out and talking to Kerry. He says, well, you know, I want him back. So the people who matter, the people who actually are running the change, who are driving the change, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, I talked to Jim, they need someone like a Kerry back who there's no train-up time. It's not like, you know, in the Army, you always have a 6-month, oh, we got to get the guy trained, and then he's got to go out and get the right size boots because, you know, he's got this odd size 13 and a half, we don't have that, so we got to order it, and he can't do anything. Like, none of that with Kerry. Kerry is turnkey. You know, you buy a car, get a key, and you drive off. That's Kerry. So,
Yeah, I like it.
so I think I would ask you all to do anything you can to help return my friend Kerry to the House.
Thank you, thank you. So, and that's, you know, I don't know if you know my story, but yeah, I was kind of unexpectedly elected to Congress. And from the moment I started, they said, well, he'll be a one-term congressman, and they spent $2.5 million. Well, you know, now he's leaving. So it's become an open seat again. There's 5 people running. And you know, politicians, we all know this, politicians like to say one thing and do another. But here's the thing, you got my report card, I gave it to you. That is my record as being a member of Congress. Now I have some Republicans say, well, I'm a little more moderate than you, Kerry. Well, let's see if we can use some critical thinking skills. And by the way, critical thinking is considered the highest form of intelligence. It is. So, but Kerry, we want you to be, I'm supporting more moderate. I said, well, you know, I had a 93% conservative rating. And that's not really being a moderate. However, do you know how many members of Congress during their first term in office passed 3 pieces of legislation in the last 50 years? And by the way, that legislation, one had 126 co-sponsors, which was a record for a first-term congressman. And every one of those bills passed the House with 100% bipartisan support. Basically, Democrats and Republicans supported the bill. In fact, it was so successful that they just had a, well, it's a good bill, let's let it go. And they didn't even want to show up to vote for it or vote against it because it was pretty much accepted by everybody. That's what we mean by 100% bipartisan support. Do you know how many first-term congressmen in the last 50 years have accomplished that feat? Take a guess. 1. Do you know who that was? Thank you. That's right. It's record history and 100% score for cutting government waste. How many would like to cut out the government waste? Exactly. How about this one? We won 2 constituent awards for serving our constituents. 2. How many members of Congress do you know have accomplished that? They usually get 1 if they're really good. All right. Here's the other thing that's quite interesting. We had an open book. Now, we didn't hire a fancy writer to put out a newsletter every quarter or every month. And by the way, in order to get that newsletter, you have to request the congressional office send it to you. A member of Congress cannot go advertise the fact that you just send everybody an email and say, hey, you want to get a copy of our newsletter? You can't advertise it, you got to sign up. That's the requirement. But what we did do is put, on Facebook, we had a page where this is the vote, and this is why I voted for it. And you know what all the Democrats did? Oh, that's a dirty, blank bill, right? You shouldn't have done that. They call you all kinds of names. Ladies and gentlemen, that's politics, right? Now, all that pressure, here at home with some of my fellow Republicans who didn't think a regular guy should be elected to office, and the Democrats, which we kind of expect the Democrats to pick out Republicans. All that pressure, I'm really looking forward to getting that again because that pressure allowed me to achieve some really great things for our district. So, if you elect me to go back, and I hope you will, and support me, I want those Democrats and Republicans to put that pressure back on me because I really love the pressure. When the whole world, it looks like it's in chaos, we can be well organized. And I gotta tell you, one other thing. One of my staffers, we talked about her at breakfast, Lindsay Duvall, she was my scheduler. And she walked into my office in Washington one time and she said, Congressman, she's got a tear coming down her eye. Congressman, I heard that our office was the most disorganized office in Washington, D.C. I looked at her and I said, Lindsay, wow. Let's see, at that time I had passed my first bill, or I think a second bill. So I said something like, we passed 2 bills, we got 100% score for cutting government waste. We rated the second most transparent member of Congress, and gee, Lindsay, can you imagine what we're going to accomplish when we finally get organized? And from that moment on, she was all smiles. The problem is, in Washington, there's 5 things you'll have a hard time finding. Number 1 is the truth. Number 2 is common sense. Number 3 is a sense of humor. Number 4 is an honest reporter. And 5 is a parking space. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess I've used my 5 minutes up, so if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. However, I strongly suggest, for me as well, because I like to lead by example, or my opponents, before you ask us any questions, you should hire somebody to hook us up to a lie detector. And you'll find I'll always pass, because my #1 rule is never lie. Now, don't ask me what size fish I caught the last time I went fishing, because I may stretch the truth a bit. But the facts are right there in that report card. Check them out yourself. We got an A and B score of almost 10, if you combine the 10 most Republican, conservative watchdog groups in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of people out there that focus on that 7%. We call them the 7%ers. You know, the part I got wrong. But the truth is, in Washington, D.C., if you got Heritage, if you watch Heritage and like what they have to say and you like FreedomWorks, sometimes they differ on a bill. So no matter how you vote, and we don't check with them first, by the way, but no matter how you vote, you're going to lose points on one or the other, because Heritage may say, you know, you shouldn't vote for that bill, you're going to lose points. And FreedomWorks says, oh, if you do vote for that bill, you know, that's really great. So you won't lose votes or points on one, but you'll lose points on the other, and vice versa. So, any questions? That concludes my speech. Subject to your questions. Now, how we do it in the military? Subject to your questions.
I just want, as a side note, a friend of mine who served in the Michigan National Guard,
Yeah.
she went overseas to Kuwait. She said you're a really nice guy.
Who was that?
Don Fiorentino?
Sean?
Don Fiorentino. She said were you connected to Michigan National Guard?
Yes.
Yeah, because she met you there briefly.
Fiorentino.
Don Fiorentino.
It was a sergeant or lieutenant?
She's a specialist.
Oh, okay. Spec
She's
4
a
Fiorentino.
specialist. She's in Southside Engineering.
In what kind of engineering?
Southside Engineering.
Southside.
And she's a dual factor. She quit Southside Engineering and milked cows for a while.
Well, that's
went
good.
back into Southside Engineering. She's like kind of a country girl. She has a horse.
Oh, that's why we get along well, because I'm kind of a hobby farmer, and
She
somebody.
ended up transferring to Illinois National Guard.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So, but she went overseas to Kuwait and worked. Her boss was Kuwaiti royalty, but she came from an American contracting company.
Yeah.
And she trained in Texas, and she went overseas to Kuwait, and she just said you were a real nice guy.
Yeah. Well, you try to be, but you know, as a sergeant first class, I was what they call in the Marines a gunny, and I was the longest serving sergeant first class, I think, in the National Guard. I think I hold the record for that too, because every time they had a promotion board, you know, you go in front of a board and try and get promoted. I didn't show up because I liked my job. You know, I have a master's and 5 undergraduate. They asked me to be an officer, I think, 2 or 3 times, and I said, I'm not interested. It's a weekend thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, I have one of my good friends was an optometrist, and he was a Spec 4.
She retired with Illinois National Guard.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good.
And I mean, it's hard to be called up again, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, that's one of the things I like about.
After a certain amount of time, you need to retire, you know.
Yeah, I think my entire life is one of service. You know, my family's like that. My wife here today, nurse for 41 years, married to that rascal Carrie Bentivolio for 41 years. And for me, you know, I worked in the automotive. I became a school teacher. I tried another business, didn't do too well. Got called away for Desert Storm. Didn't actually go to Desert Storm, but I came back and my business was pretty much ruined. And because of the recession as well, did me in. But became a school teacher. And so I really haven't, the only jobs I really had for a really long time was being in the service. I have 27 years total. That's active, part-time, and inactive Ready Reserve. And then you have, what else was the other job? Husband and father. 41 years. And the best, yeah, actually the best one was my daughter is an honor graduate from Detroit Country Day, where she got a scholarship to attend. And we heard some great news. Our eldest grandson, 11 years old, got a full boat, pretty much, scholarship. I think they got paid $1,000 a year. Full boat scholarship to Country Day, and he follows in the tradition of earning what you get. There's nobody, you know, I was born with a spoon in my mouth, but it was stainless steel. Okay, so, yeah, we believe in earning it, and we're also a family of service. My daughter's a teacher, I was a teacher, served in the military. My wife's a nurse, 41 years, ICU for most of that career, right? And now she's the nurse educator at Providence Southfield, Providence Park in Novi. And we have a new slogan. She mentioned to me a while back, she says, you know, when you get reelected, I'm going to retire. So, elect Kerry Bentivolio so his wife can retire. That's our new slogan, right? So, what can I tell you? I never voted for a omnibus bill, never. Check the record. I never voted to raise the debt ceiling. I think I had some opponents say I did, but I didn't. Check the record. We never surprised anybody in office, whether it was Speaker of the House, or the leader, or majority leader, or a chairman of the committee. They always knew where I stood. They would never be lied to. They would never be surprised. And we wouldn't tarnish the office. And if you really look deeply, you'll see there were no scandals as a congressman. So I hold that like I do in high esteem the uniform. You know, and the only time I really tarnished the uniform of the military was on the way back from Iraq during my 2-week leave. Is we got off in uniform in Atlanta, the whole airport erupted in applause. It's amazing. It was a lot different than Vietnam. I get on the plane with one other soldier to fly from Atlanta to Detroit, and I'm right behind that wall between first class and, you know, the regular folks, right? And this stewardess came up to me and handed me a beer, and I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to drink beer while I'm in uniform. And she looked at me and she said, looked around, and she said, Sergeant, I don't think anybody on this plane is going to tell on you. That's your story. And so the one other guy, a lieutenant, he and I both had the beer. And then the great honor, much different than Vietnam, coming home from Vietnam, was the stewardess asked for everybody to stay seated when we pulled up to the gate, and because the two guys are home on leave from Iraq, and they'd like to spend as much time as possible at home. So please let them depart the plane before you get up. And they did. And what a contrast from Vietnam to coming home now, because guess who was out there waiting for me when I got off the plane? My wife and family. Welcome home. Something we didn't get when we came home from Vietnam. Yeah. Unwelcome and unappreciated Vietnam versus what happens today. And I want to thank all Americans, every single one of them, for changing the attitude. Whether you agree with the war or not, it's still the soldier does his job. And they have no choice. Yes?
Can you talk about your mobile office that you had?
Oh, yes. We had a
unique.
Yeah, one of the things we did as a congressman is I had a mobile office that traveled the district. You know, it's not a big district, but it's big, and it can take you an hour sometimes during rush hour or more to get from here to Troy, for instance. But we had a mobile office every week. It would be during, I think, 10 months out of the year, 9 to 10 months, depending on the weather. We would travel and take our mobile office to like Livonia for 2 weeks or a week, Canton, so on and so forth. And the most attention we got was when the Democrats went by. They saluted us with that middle finger. And but for the most part, it helped a lot of people come in, veterans, you know, people with Social Security, and there was a thing out there saying, oh, Bentivolio wants to get rid of Social Security. No, that's not true. I would like to protect Social Security because it's your money, and you paid into it. And somebody, what is it, International Coalition, some group called me the other day, and they said, we only spend 1% on foreign aid, 1% of our budget. Well, that's over $1 billion. And I go, you know, I don't really want to give money to countries that don't like us and burn our flag and that kind of thing. And maybe we should move that into Social Security to make it more solvent and put a lock and key on it. And they didn't like to hear that. Right? 1% of our budget, that's all we use for foreign aid, USA aid, but that's over $1 billion. way over, right? And so there's some concerns about that we'd like to address when I go back to Washington. Any more questions? Yeah. Yes, sir.
My name is Bob Legal. I'm with the American Legion.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, you can't capitalize on the state meeting, for example, is coming up next week, and they can't endorse the Legion and the VFW. They can, have you as a speaker to it. They can endorse.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of their. And it's too bad you can't enhance that veterans background.
Yes, I was the only member of Congress who served both Vietnam and Iraq, so I know both worlds. I also was the most decorated military veteran in Congress, and let me confirm this for you. So one of the things, and Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer will tell you, we have a military liaison office in Longworth.
No, it's in Rayburn,
Rayburn building.
the basement.
Yeah, in the basement. There's a military liaison, every branch of service, and they came up to my office and said, "We understand you're a veteran." I said, "Yes, can we have a copy of your DD Form 214, which, as you know, sir, is the official military record of your service, shortened, right? And it has a list of how many years you served, all your awards, and so on and so forth. And they do the research, and they publish a book. And they have your picture in there, and your service, and all the awards. I was the most decorated soldier, veteran in Congress, and they verified all that information on there with official records. And so it was a great honor to do that. And what was the point? Your question was VFW. I'm a life member of the VFW, sir.
There's a question
Yeah.
been put out by,
Yeah, they can't, VFW cannot endorse officially because that's just the way, nor can the American Legion, nor can AMVETS, nor can Vietnam Veterans of America endorse. But I will tell you, I went to my VFW post meeting, and I had a couple of my opponents show up wanting to get petition signatures, and they said, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for this, but they said, you don't have Bentivolio's back when he was a congressman, but we have his back now. And so, there's, I'm running against a veteran as well, and we thank him for his service, but I don't know if you read in the paper, we have a little problem with him. We sent out a nice request 6 years ago saying, stop what you're doing. And he didn't stop, and then he questioned my military records and said, here's my DD Form 214, check it out. And then we asked him again nicely, and then I went through 2 pastors and a priest asking their advice, and then I went to the VFW hall, and I said, hey guys, here's 6 years ago, I had a write-in opponent, this is what they said about my military record, and I ignored it. Because we're Christians, we gotta forgive 70 times 7, right? Isn't that how it works? And we don't like to sue. We don't. And so you got to turn your cheek, Christian. Well, at least they're not feeding us to the lions, but, they want to do that to a certain degree. And so then I asked them, I asked the VFW post, what do you guys think I should do? And they made this recommendation, and then we have a judge, retired judge, who explained the ropes and what it is to be malicious versus, you can say anything about a politician you want, we all call them crooks and that kind of thing, but they can't really sue you for defamation of character because it's kind of tradition. We all know that politicians are crooks, right? But in this case, there's some maliciousness there, and it meets all the requirements of maliciousness. Whether a judge or not agrees with it is another issue, but judges are judges, right? So VFW Post voted unanimously for me to do what I needed to do, and then they fought over who was going to serve the paper. So, sir, I served my country in 2 wars. I have 27 awards for valiant service. I was in Vietnam and was put in for a lot of other awards, but lost those awards because I wouldn't sign a piece of paper saying that the veteran who just did himself in died in combat, and you'll never get my name or his name from me because I don't want his family to know that his name is inscribed on the Vietnam War Memorial, not from wounds or an accident, but rather self-inflicted wounds. And perhaps that's the reason, sir, that I got on a bicycle. I started walking from my home in Milford, Michigan, and when I got to Toledo, I think I ended up getting a used bicycle and rode that to Columbus, Ohio until it fell apart, and then got another bicycle, stopped at every VFW and American Legion Hall and told them to call their congressman or member of Congress and protest about the 300,000 veterans who died waiting for VA health care. The 20 to 22 veterans we lose daily to suicide, and the over 300,000 veterans that are not homeless. Sean Hannity, President Trump, then candidate Trump, and a few other people. 26 television interviews, 26 newspaper, radio, and television interviews on the subject brought attention to the VA scandal about the mistreatment of veterans. Now we're seeing the president just signed a document allowing veterans to go just about anywhere they want to get treatment. And sometimes it doesn't mean you have to actually pass a piece of legislation. All you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is focus on the truth and plant the seed on fertile soil. And you will get the things done, if it's the right thing to do. Yes, sir?
Yeah, Kerry, if you get elected, what can you as a U.S. Congressman do to straighten up the judicial system? Like we have a judge here in Oakland County that takes it on himself to make it hard for another person to run for an office. And what can you do about that?
Oh, well, we are doing something about it. I don't know if you know this, but when I came back from Congress, I was forced into bankruptcy because of a lawsuit. And we couldn't pay. And they garnished my last month's pay as a congressman because we couldn't pay the settlement. I just said we have to file bankruptcy. But before we did that, they garnished my last pay as the December pay as a congressman. When I left Congress, there are no lifetime benefits, contrary to popular belief. You don't get anything. The only thing of lifetime benefits that I have is I can walk on the floor of Congress anytime I want, and I can use their gym. Well, I'm not going to fly to Washington to use their gym. And you can't serve as a lobbyist for a year after leaving office. So my only income was my VA disability check, which I'm 70% disabled, according to the VA, and a National Guard military retirement check. And that too was garnished. So I had no income, and I became, if you will, a kept man because my wife's a nurse and she had all the money, right? I had nothing. So I sacrificed pretty much a lot more, and even though you make a lot of money, we didn't spend it frivolously, we just spent it wisely, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. And so I was sued, and we filed bankruptcy. Now that bankruptcy was not just for Kerry Bentivolio, but also for the campaign, because the campaign and Kerry Bentivolio were sued. So now it's been discharged. I don't owe anybody money. Isn't that great? In America, you can start again. If first you don't succeed, try again. Like Henry Ford, Donald Trump, thousands of other people get to have a new lease on life. Otherwise, the alternative is what? Oh, debtor's prison or indentured servitude. No, we like you to take risks even if you fail, because the Constitution allows us to fail sometimes, and we want that to happen. We don't always want it to happen, but we understand it can happen. So now I'm discharged, no debt, right? Well, I sued one of my opponents for defamation of character, and he's a good friend of the guy who sued me originally, and now we get a document that says my campaign funds are frozen because they're garnishing the money in my campaign for a debt that's been discharged. And the judge, the original judge of the lawsuit, after we sued my opponent, my lawyer was in the courtroom handling a case for 2 other clients. And in the middle of the proceedings, the judge said, "Is your new client paying you in reindeer?" And my attorney said, "I'm sorry, Your Honor." And he said, "Is your client paying you in reindeer?" Referring to my former business as a reindeer rancher, not farmer. We don't plant little reindeer, and grow big ones. But that's fake news for you. It's, sometimes even by omission. And so, And the attorney was a little taken aback. She was still confused. Turned to lawyers on the other side of the bench. And he said, oh, it's the newspaper article in the paper. And by the way, that same judge, Judge James Alexander, Oakland County, signed the papers, knowing full well that I'm not a wealthy man. Signed the paper, knowing that I filed bankruptcy. Signed the paper that authorized this illegal, inappropriate freezing of our campaign money. Which is good for my opponents because now I can't pass out my report cards or buy radio advertising. And now what's happened since then though, we have ordered 1,000 signs paid for by people by in-kind donations. Rather than donating the money directly to the campaign, they just go out and buy the signs in our behalf. We still have to report it as an in-kind donation, but the money is not tied up in any legal proceedings. This is our Republican Party. This is how we operate. And this is why I think we call them rhinos. Republican in name only. They vote for Obamacare expansion, they raise our gas tax our pensions, and put other regulations in place to make our lives more miserable. If that's a Republican here, I don't want any part of it, because I am a Republican in the same vein as Ronald Reagan. There's only one mistake he's made, by the way, and pay attention to this, and Tony can explain it. Remember that mistake that Ronald Reagan made? He gave amnesty to all those illegals in our country. And you want to ask me why California's gone so blue? Think about it. Now we want to allow DACA. Really? Prove to me that that young man or woman came to this country as a child. Beyond, well, not beyond a reasonable doubt. How about preponderance of evidence? Well, the Free Press editorial guy, the editor, said, this is what he said to me on the phone, I wish I recorded it. He said, we can have their parents testify that they brought their child here illegally. Great. We're going to give the child citizenship as we deport their parents back to the country of their origin because they're here illegally? Really? And then once we get them citizenship, they can bring all their friends and their cousins and relatives here. And Michigan and other states will go blue. Those are the facts. Look at history. I'm a history teacher. And I'll tell you, if we don't learn from our past, we're destined to repeat it. I'm definitely against DACA. However, I'm willing to compromise. The Liberty Caucus says, you've been brought here illegally? Great. We'll give you a lifetime visa. And even if you get married to an American, you can never become a citizen. And you can't bring your relatives here or sponsor them. You can work here, live your life, go to college, but you cannot get citizenship. As far as I'm concerned, that's the right way to handle it. It's fair. I'm not going to reward somebody for breaking the law, right? Everybody's, oh, well, that's not fair. It was no fault of their own. Yeah, mom and dad go out and rob a bank, and they get caught. They go to jail. Their child was not a part to that criminal activity, but they will pay a price. Unfortunately, they will pay a price. What's that price? They got to go live with a relative or foster care. That hurts. It's a terrible thing. But guess what? It's not our fault. His or her parents were criminals. Am I right? What would King Solomon do in this case? That's what I ask myself. What would King Solomon do? Give him the right to be here, no problem. But he can't be a citizen because your parents broke the law and you came here illegally. I'm not going to reward people who violated the law and put them in front of the line of good, honest people out there in the world who want to come to this country legally. Is that fair? If you were a teacher and you let one child in your classroom violate and get away with breaking a rule, what do you think happens to the rest of the class? But Jimmy got away with it. Why don't you let us do it? There goes the rule. You had a question, sir?
I just want to make a statement. I ran for state rep, and when I was running for state rep here in Livonia, a young gentleman was here on a work visa from Germany. His name was Levin Schneek. And Levin was a great guy, loved Ronald Reagan, a good Christian and a good conservative Republican, but he's a German citizen. He's done everything he could do legally to become a citizen, and he can't do it. He has now, he's got a political science degree from a prestigious university in Germany. He is working in Tennessee for a German company on an assembly line manufacturing standing belts for cars, for auto body, so that he can get his green card, so he can work his way into America. That's how hard it is to do it legally, yet we want to reward people that came here illegally.
Exactly. And the other thing is, we have some strict standards, and I will tell you this, that there are some people that are attempting to get here legally that can't. And doing casework for a lot of people who, my office did the casework. In fact, I have two or three giant clipboards with all the laws of immigration, so we had ready reference to find out, along with newspaper articles and so on and so forth. And sometimes we find that we can't help somebody because they did something they shouldn't have done. And it brings up a question. And yeah, we got to be very careful, where we used to be, very careful on who we brought into this country. The problem we have today is we're bringing in people, refugees, who there's no official way of finding out if they are in fact coming here for the right reasons. And the reason is because if you're a Catholic, like a Chaldean, right, there are church records of your birth, your relatives, almost like a lineage you can follow. Some of the other religions, that's not the case. We brought in Vietnamese refugees from Vietnam, and a lot of them came and became U.S. citizens. And I know quite a few of them. In fact, I served with some children of the Boat people, if you will, that's what they were called. But in every one of those cases where they were granted U.S. citizenship, they worked for the United States military in Vietnam. Their parents did. Or they were a South Vietnamese soldier or officer. There were official records to document that they in fact supported America. You don't have that today with some of the refugees coming in. There are no records whatsoever. And there is, I don't know if you read about this, but we have a couple hospitals here in Michigan where pregnant people from, pregnant women, not people, but pregnant women came to the United States on vacation, had their baby here, and got a U.S. certificate of birth. And they go back to their country of origin and then sell that birth certificate to somebody else willing to pay so they can come to the United States, claim citizenship.
Terry.
What was it? Oakwood Hospital. Oakwood Hospital. You're absolutely right. I didn't want to say it, but you said it. Okay.
For me?
You go.
Kerry, one of the meetings I attended, I don't know if it was here or not, but we understand, or they understand, that most of the people, the immigrants that come in, were sponsored by the churches in America. Is this correct or not?
Yes.
Okay, now what are we going to do to these churches that keeps bringing these people? How much do they get per head that bring them over?
Actually, the actual number I don't know, but they do get paid money to do this, and that's why they're doing it. And we do it out of the goodness of our heart, right? Because we want to help people in need.
Now you should, well,
But
if they know, if the churches know this is against the law, or we don't want them in there, why would you say they're doing it for kindness?
Well, you tell me, because we Christians, we want to help people, right? We're passionate, caring people. That's who we are. That's America. Because we're a country made up of immigrants.
What I'm trying to lead up to
Yes,
is
sir.
that a lot of these churches, I'm not going to mention it seems like they fell in with the Democratic Party. Am I correct?
I would think in those terms sometimes, yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
all.
I would agree with that. But the problem is, there's whole areas of Saudi Arabia and other countries that were set up, because look, when I went to Iraq, we stop in Kuwait, and we get all our clothing, food, get ready to go, that's a story in itself, to in-country, which is Iraq, and do your mission. And we lived in these really nice insulated tents that were air-conditioned and heated in the cold, because it can drop to like 40 degrees below, or 40 degrees in the desert, right? At night, it can drop that. And so, yeah, you need heat. So these were heated tents, and there were mess halls. These were portable mess halls. They feed like 450 soldiers in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we had a medical facility, all in these nice insulated tents, with a nice floor on the sand, and bunk beds, and the whole bit. And if you're a refugee, why can't you go to one of those places? It's good enough for American soldiers. And just till you find a place that you can relocate to in a country that respects your faith, or a country where you can practice your faith, without, and it's a lot easier to disseminate there. If you don't want to disseminate, why are you coming to this country? And that's what I'm seeing. Patrick Colbeck, is explaining this. A lot of people try to explain this. If you come to this country, great. My family came here as my grandfather on the Italian side of my family got off the boat from Italy and got right back on the boat and went and fought for the American Division in Europe, World War I. And guess what happened to him? He got U.S. citizenship. Automatically you served in, Europe. Now you're here, and he became a U.S. citizen. I don't have a problem with that either. You want to serve our country for 4 years? Learn our language, become an American? Yeah, we'll help you. We'll do everything we can. How many of you would not do that? But if you don't want to, then you need to find a place, someplace else to go. We'd love to have you, but in this place, we call it the Great American Stew. You still, if you're a carrot or a potato or something else, you're still a carrot and a potato, but your flavor is the rest of us. I have influenced you and you've influenced us for the good. Not because, not for, the change.
I take the church, you're saying that they're doing it for the good, but if they are doing it for the good,
well,
why do they have to be paid money, is what I'm saying. But
I agree with you, sir.
That's
where the critical thinking skills come in, and, it's a hot potato because, you're telling us we can't do this, because, we're not doing it for the kind of spire, then why are you getting paid? There's a lot of hypocrisy. And I'm a vaccine choice person. I think you should be well educated before you get a vaccine, because there are 76 vaccines out there, and some are proven to cause harm to people, and they're downplaying it because of the pharmaceutical interest. Yeah, okay, you give me a time thing, but I will tell you, if they invent a vaccine that prevents hypocrisy, I'm going to make it mandatory, and all those Democrats will become Republican. Well, conservative Republicans, I think. So, and you had a question. Yes, sir. Who's the other person that had a question? We're gonna, yes, sir.
Well,
and then
like you, I'm a veteran, and one of my real concerns is that the submarine I served on, you couldn't even get on my pier if you were not a U.S. citizen. Now I'm hearing about people who are not legally in the country and being allowed to serve in the military, which is a real security issue for me.
yes, and that would be one of the requirements. If you want to be a U.S. citizen, right, and you came here. Well, you can come here, request at a U.S. embassy. You'd like to be a United States citizen. You'd like to live in the United States, and we say, well, would you like to apply this way, or would you like to be in the military? Now I have a problem with that, because if we can't document your background, because every member of the service gets a national agency check, correct? Before you can go in the military, you have to have a national agency check. We verify that you are, in fact, who you say you are. We check to verify you, in fact, grew up here and were born here. We do that kind of check. You can come into the military. But as you well know, it's a very strict organization. We don't, well, if you're a snowflake or a fake, you won't last long. Because that drill sergeant gets in your face. If you were a snowflake, we can tell those snowflakes, because after that drill sergeant's in your face, at least when I was in the military, The snowflakes, all you had to do is check their pants. If they were wet, you knew they were a snowflake. And if you were, didn't have wet pants after that drill sergeant chewed your butt, yeah, okay, we can go to the next level. It's very tough, at least our day, or my day. Yes, sir.
One thing to add to your comments about the people coming here as refugees and whatnot, I think all but one of the countries that President Trump was banning lacked one thing, and that was a functional government. So there was no documentation of who you are.
Well, there never is even when, because in Iraq we, had to verify some of our interpreters, and if they were Muslim, for instance, there were no records whatsoever anywhere, even when the government was in session, right? In Vietnam, it was kind of interesting because it seemed like a lot of people had the same name. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they all had the same name. It was kind of interesting. But there was a lot of Catholics in Vietnam, and a lot of the Catholics in Vietnam actually worked for the United States government. They're the ones that left North Vietnam, or the outskirts, the villages of Saigon, and they migrated to Saigon and got jobs at AFEs, which is Armed Forces Exchange, where you buy, clothing, civilian clothing, shoes, other stuff that you don't get issued to you by the military. You want to buy a radio for listening to Armed Forces radio or something, you would get it from the PX. That's what it was, PX. So a lot of Vietnamese worked in the PX. A lot of went to work for the intelligence section branches of our army, and when it was time for them to leave Vietnam because of the communist takeover, they had that record, which some of these people in the Middle East don't have any records whatsoever. And what we rely on is if in fact they served as an interpreter in good standing or as a member of helping the United States Army. Yeah, let's bring those people here because they have proven to us that they have our best interest in mind. And yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. What I have a problem with is some guy that just shows up and says, I'm such and such, and we're going to take your word for it? I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a little problem with that. I want to know who's coming into my house. How about you? Do you want to know before you invite somebody in your house? Who are you? You don't just let any stranger walk in. Maybe the Democrats do, but I often ask a Democrat when they don't want me to put a border up, do you lock your house at night? They go, yeah, why? I don't want anybody just walking in. Hey, welcome to America. Put up a border wall. But it's got to be multidimensional, just so you know. And I've told President Trump this. We got to have a multiple dimensional border. Because they come under the ground, they fly over, so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
One more thing.
One more thing.
The President of the United States, who I supported, does hosted an iftar dinner.
A what dinner?
An iftar dinner.
Iftar dinner.
Yes, the celebration of Ramadan.
Oh.
If you were elected, we approach him and ask him, when we will have a Passover Seder or an Easter dinner at the White House?
I think they've had the Easter dinner there and some other functions as well. But you're right. We should. Yeah, you gotta.
Recognize one, you need to recognize them all.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Look, I've often said that, look, I was a National Guardsman. My unit's from Detroit. Okay, I went to Iraq. 60% of my unit were soldiers from Iraq. Soldiers from Detroit. Okay? And then we had about 20 soldiers that were, I think it's inactive, ready, reserve. Yeah, IRR. These are soldiers that served in active duty, called back to active duty after leaving the military. Got it? They were good old boys from Alabama and Mississippi. They, drove the pickup truck, flew the Confederate flag. You know what I'm talking about? And they're in a almost all-black unit from Detroit. And they've got this Confederate flag in their room. Who did they call? The soldiers from Detroit. Who did they contact and want to iron out these differences between the good old boys from Mississippi and Alabama and the good old boys from Detroit? I made it very simple. Gentlemen, This is a unit, and the Army itself, for the most part, is like America. We have a diversity of religious, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds come for a common mission. I want, like my Republican Party, them to watch my back. I want my soldiers to watch the backs of their fellow soldiers without regard to cultural, ethnic, religious, or political persuasion. We're all Americans. We're here, we all got that little name tag that says U.S. Army, Navy, Marines, or Air Force. It's kind of like a big family. If we can't get along, then we don't need to be here. And you don't need to be in the military. And guess what? They got rid of that Confederate flag, and they knew from then on how everybody felt. It wasn't stifling somebody's political beliefs. It was just doing the right thing at the right time so that we can all accomplish our mission.
I'm gonna interrupt here really quick. My name is James Hooper. I'm with the Kerry Bentivolio campaign. I see most of you have the report cards of the congressman, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this clipboard around with a pen, and I'm going to ask you if you would like more information to please write down your name and contact information, either your email or your phone number or both, so that we can get a hold of you with more information, let you know other events that Kerry will be at coming up in the future, and just to be able to get you some other information as well. So I'm going to pass that around, and I don't know if there's any last minute questions, or if anybody would like a photograph with Kerry, or
This coming up Saturday, the 16th, Senator Patrick Holbeck is having a fundraiser. I am going to be the chef. I'm taking my smoker out there, and we're going to smoke a bunch of chickens and hot dogs and kielbasa. Tyrone X is from Ram Radio, is going to be an MC, along with Deshaun Wilkins, who's running for Senate. And there's a gentleman, the lady that owns the house is Debbie Haas, and she's her husband's a NASCAR racer. They have drag racing cars. They're going to have those all out for display. So it's going to be a good time on a Saturday afternoon with race cars and good food, good people. It's a fundraiser, and if you're interested, there's some flyers on the table before you leave. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Ken. That's it.